Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 true disturbing stories about Halloween in Appalachia. If you ever think what fear feels like, wait until dark in the mountains. But before we begin, please consider subscribing. And don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Let me know where you're watching from. Thank you all. Now, let's start. I was 17 when it happened. That Halloween, my cousin Denny roped me into one of his classic dumb ideas. This time, a backwoods dare with two of his friends. We were up in the Appalachians, way off the map, heading to this place locals called Silver Thatch. Used to be a mining camp 100 years ago, but now it's mostly crumbling stone and bad stories. It's the kind of spot teenagers use for drinking and showing off, especially around Halloween. Denny had heard about it from a guy at the auto shop where he worked part-time. Not ghost stories exactly, more like odd stuff turning up, things that didn't belong. Old metal tools with no rust, letters written like yesterday, wooden toys, hand-carved and clean as if they'd just been made. One guy swore he found barefoot footprints circling his tent in November. So of course, Denny wanted in. He said it'd be funny or creepy. Either way, a good story. We loaded up in Travis's Jeep just before sunset with whiskey, flashlights, and the world's worst tent. Ben brought a box of expired sparklers from his uncle's garage, because why not? We drove until the road gave out, then hiked about half an hour through trees that felt like they'd been waiting for something. It was quiet. No wind, no birds, just the four of us crunching over old leaves. By the time we reached the clearing, the sun was already gone. The spot we picked had probably been the general store back in the mining days, or what was left of it. Waist-high stone walls, a broken chimney leaning like it gave up, and a single wooden post still standing with a rusted wire drooping from it like a noose. Everything was dark, but not pitch black. Just that heavy kind of gray where flashlights feel useless unless you're shining them right at your feet. Travis lit a couple of sparklers. Ben passed the whiskey around. We dropped our sleeping bags in the lopsided tent and started daring each other to sleep outside it. Typical dumb energy. It all felt fun, stupid, normal, until Denny knelt by the fire ring. He pulled something out from between two rocks. It was one of those old-school metal candy tins, the kind grandmas used to keep mints or spare buttons in. This one was dented, faded with a barely there floral print. Looked like it had been stepped on and forgotten for years. But the weird thing? It wasn't rusty. He popped it open, expecting gum wrappers or maybe someone's secret weed stash. Instead, just two folded pieces of paper. No candy, no coins, no mold. Just paper, yellowed but dry. The first one was a drawing, pencil lines showing a ridge, a cluster of trees, and a circle marked around what looked like a stone ring. It was rough, but weirdly accurate, looked almost exactly like where we were standing. We turned it over. On the back, in thick block letters, it said, "This is where I saw her last." Denny read it out loud. Then he just stopped. His whole vibe shifted in seconds, from smug to blank. He held the paper out like it might bite. Travis snorted, this nervous, shaky kind of laugh. Ben said, "She who?" with a half smile that didn't stick. Nobody answered. Travis picked up the second sheet. It was shorter. Just one line at the top, list of people she took with her, and under that, 5 names. 3 were crossed out in red ink. 1 was underlined. The 5th one just said, "You." No jokes this time. Even the woods felt quieter. Ben whispered, "That's a prank, right?" But Denny didn't respond. He just stared at the paper like it was doing something to him. I asked if anyone recognized the names. None of us did. But I noticed something. The handwriting was different from the first sheet. Same kind of ink, but the second one looked rushed. Like whoever wrote it was pressing hard, almost tearing the paper. Ben wanted to toss it in the fire. Travis said we should follow the map. Maybe it's a setup, he said, like a Halloween scavenger thing. Or maybe it wasn't. We zipped our jackets, grabbed the flashlights, and followed the rough sketch. It took us down a narrow hill, through brambles that scratched at our jeans, past some old mining rails half swallowed by dirt. After 20 minutes, we found the spot. It was a perfect ring of stones, 10 feet across, waist high. Right in the center, there was a rusted pole with a busted lantern hanging from it, swinging gently back and forth. There was no wind, no sounds, just that faint metallic clink of glass against rusted metal. We all stood there, not really saying anything. Then Denny spotted it, a child's shoe sitting just outside the ring. Small, black leather with a silver buckle. It looked new. Too new. Not muddy, not worn, just clean. Like it hadn't spent a second outside. Travis nudged it with a stick. Nothing happened, but next to it, there was a single footprint. Small, bare, pressed into the soft dirt. Toes pointed straight into the woods. We froze. I don't think any of us realized we'd gone completely silent. Just standing there, listening for something we couldn't name. Denny finally whispered, "This is messed up." Ben took a step back. Travis was breathing funny, like trying not to gag. I turned to head back, and that's when I saw her. Up on the hill, barely lit by the faint orange of our campfire. A figure, not moving, not walking, just standing, watching. She had long hair, a dress that clung to her like it was soaked, bare feet, pale legs, and her face. No, not her face. It was like the idea of a face, but not actually one. It didn't sit right, didn't belong, like someone had drawn it from memory and gotten it all wrong. I blinked once and she was gone. No sound, no rustle, just gone. That's when we ran, not walked, not jogged, bolted. Branches clawed at us, roots tried to trip us, didn't matter. We reached the clearing, stumbled into the tent, and found everything exactly how we left it. Bags, food, whiskey, all still there. Except the tin. Gone. Gone. We didn't pack, didn't fold the tent. Just yanked it out of the ground, threw it into the Jeep, and peeled down that trail like hell was behind us. Nobody talked until we hit pavement. Even then, it was quiet. We pulled into the gas station back in Oak Hollow. Ben went in to grab water, still shaking. That's when Denny looked down, reached between the seats, and pulled out the candy tin. Just sitting in the cup holder, he swore on everything that he hadn't grabbed it. Didn't even remember touching it. We drove it straight to the sheriff's office. Thought maybe it was part of some bigger thing. The deputy didn't laugh, didn't shrug it off. He said someone else brought in a tin just like it a few years ago. Different contents, same handwriting. He took our names, logged it, said they'd call if they needed anything. They never called. And for a while, nothing happened. We moved on. Or tried to. Then, the next Halloween, Denny called me. Said his little sister screamed in the middle of the night. Said someone had whispered her name through the window. Denny ran outside in his boxers, thinking it was a prank. Nobody there, except for a single black leather child's shoe on the porch. Same size, same buckle. He asked if I still had the list. I told him I burned it, which was true. I did burn the list. But last week, while cleaning out my closet, I found something stuck to the inside of my old hiking pack. A page, folded once, smelled faintly like smoke. I unfolded it. Just one line, written in that same shaky, pressed-down handwriting, "This is where I'll see you next." And under that, my name. Halloween that year was supposed to be low-key, quiet. After everything with the divorce, I didn't want to see anyone, talk to anyone, or hear anything except maybe my own footsteps. I'd picked up a short contract through the county maintenance work up in the Mossback Hills. There's a state forest out there that had just reopened a flood-damaged section after being closed for nearly 10 years. Apparently, they were trying to get some of the cabins ready for a local heritage festival. One of those autumn things where people come out to drink cider and pretend they're living off the land. The Park Service was short-staffed and looking for anyone willing to head up into that part of the ridge. No signal, no paved road, barely any contact after dark. Most folks passed on it. I didn't. Seemed like the right kind of alone. There were 7 cabins total. Identical builds, dark pine logs, steep roofs, tiny porches. Each one looked like it had been leaning slightly for years, like the woods were trying to reclaim them. The guy managing the project, Mitch, used to be a long-haul driver. Retired early, he called me kid, even though I was a solid decade past anyone calling me that. We'd drive up together in the afternoons, take care of whatever was on the checklist, loose boards, busted shutters, wiring checks, that sort of thing. He always headed out before midnight. Said he didn't like being up there past 11. I acted like it didn't bother me. Truth was, it did. But I needed the money and the space. The first night was easy. Cold enough to sting, but not unbearable. Nothing weird. Just sweeping, dusting, tightening screws. I crashed in cabin 5 that night and slept straight through. By the second night, the dreams started. Not exactly nightmares, just sharp. Faces I didn't recognize. Rooms that looked familiar but off, like someone had taken mine and flipped it sideways. And always, this faint humming. Low and steady, like a tune someone was mumbling right outside the walls. By the third night, it got darker. The woman started showing up. She never looked at me, just stood in the center of the room, back turned, holding something long and pointed. Sometimes she screamed, sometimes she didn't. Every time I'd wake up just before I reached her, and every time my hands would be clenched so tight my knuckles cracked. I figured it was just the silence messing with my head. No internet, no TV, just a creak of old boards and wind slipping through the siding. Mitch told me to bring a radio the next day. I did. It helped. Until it didn't. Cabin 3 started bothering me. Nothing obvious, just a tight feeling in my chest every time I stepped inside. It smelled. Not bad, just off. Stale, like shut-up air and dry fabric. And the back door refused to stay latched. I'd lock it, check it, walk away, and 10 minutes later it'd be swinging open again. One night I propped a chair against it. Next morning, the chair was sitting out on the porch. Mitch said we'd wrap up by Halloween. This was the 29th. He'd take the lower trail and finish the creekside cabins. I'd clean up the top 3. We agreed to meet in the middle for coffee and head out from there. He joked about all the city folks coming up that weekend to find their roots. Said they'd be better off back in their apartments. Before we split up, he looked at me and said, "Leave the lights on in cabin 3 tonight." Didn't say why. I didn't ask. That night, the dreams got worse. I woke up soaked, heart pounding. This time, I saw her face. It wasn't a stranger anymore. It was Amanda, my ex. She looked exactly like she had the day we signed the papers. Blank. And when I sat up, I realized I'd been crying in my sleep. Halloween rolled in dry and gray. Sky looked bruised. Mitch handed me a thermos before he left, said he'd be clocking out early. "Don't stick around past midnight," he said. "Things get restless up here." He didn't smile when he said it, just turned and walked off toward the lower trail. By the time I lost sight of his taillights, I was completely alone. I turned on the radio. Static. Figured I'd power through quick cleanup, no nonsense. Dust, sweep, stack the chairs, trash out. Then the radio popped. One sharp crack and died. Right after that, I heard boots. Outside. Slow, heavy steps circling the cabin. I froze. Called out, expecting to hear Mitch. Nothing. The footsteps stopped behind the back door. Then the latch lifted itself. No sound, just a soft click, and the door swinging in an inch or two, just enough for cold air to slip inside. I walked over and shut it fast, locked it, waited. When I turned back, the flashlight I'd left on the table was gone. I found it over in cabin 4. Thing is, I hadn't even been in cabin 4 that night. But there it was, on the floor, beam pointing at something I really didn't want to see. Symbols. Chalk white marks spiraling across the floorboards. Loops and jagged hooks, all curling in toward this blackened ring in the center, like something had been burned there. The wood was still warm. I called Mitch. No answer. And now the air felt dense, like pressure building in my ears. I stepped out and looked down the ridge. Every single cabin door was open. All 7, swaying like they were breathing. No way it was wind. No way someone had snuck around that fast. Then the humming came back. Low and weirdly musical, floating out from the tree line. same tune from my dreams, the same one I'd caught myself humming without realizing. I didn't think, I just ran, downhill, past the cabins, but the woods didn't look right. The trail kept shifting under my feet, winding in the wrong direction. Behind me, the cabin doors started slamming shut, each one louder than the last, like gunshots chasing me through the dark. And something was moving through the trees, keeping pace. I caught flashes of red light inside the cabins, flickering like little fires. Too soft to see by, too steady to be natural. I made it back to cabin 3 and everything just stopped. The humming, the lights, even the wind. The door was open. Inside, the walls were covered symbols, more of them, but also something else. Letters, burned into the wood, spelling out a single word that didn't finish. Asmod. The smell hit me hard, like sweet ash and something rotting beneath it. Then I saw him, standing right on the threshold. Same height, same build, same face, but hollow. His skin was washed out like something drained the color from him, and his mouth didn't sit right too wide, like it had been pulled open. He didn't speak at first, just stared. Then his lips moved and I heard the tune again, only this time it had words. End her. Free yourself. He didn't shout, didn't need to. I bolted. Left everything, my bag, tools, jacket. The flashlight flickered out halfway down the hill, but I didn't stop, kept running until I saw the outline of my truck. I jumped in, slammed the door, turned the key, and drove. Didn't even breathe until the ridge disappeared in the mirror. Next morning, I called the county office and quit. Didn't give a reason. Never picked up the final paycheck. They called a few times, then stopped. The dreams faded slowly. Weeks later, I finally slept without flinching. Then, 6 months on, I ran into Mitch in the parking lot behind a hardware store. He looked rough, sunken eyes, jittery hands. Asked if I'd heard about the cabins. Said no. He showed me photos. All 7 cabins covered in black symbols, thick, tar-like paint, stretched wall to wall. And now, the word was complete. Asmodeus. He said no one had been up there since I left. No tracks, no vandalism. Just the writing. The county shut the ridge down again, declared it unstable, but Mitch couldn't stop thinking about it. Asked if I'd come back with him, just once, to see it for ourselves. I told him no. He nodded like he expected it, then walked off. Haven't seen him since. Halloween wasn't really a thing where I grew up, tucked deep in the Appalachians. People didn't do the whole costume and candy routine. At most, you'd see a carved pumpkin or two, and maybe a candle flickering on someone's porch. But once the sun dipped below the ridgeline, everyone stayed inside. There's something about the way the mountains go still at night, it just doesn't feel right to be out wandering. That year though, I ended up staying late at work. It was already dark by the time I started heading back on that narrow road into Belwick. That's when I saw it. A wooden sign nailed crooked to an old fence post near the church. Church benefit sale. The words were sloppily painted in orange, the letters bleeding a bit from the damp. I almost drove right past it. But there were still a few folding tables set up and a pickup with its tailgate down. I figured, why not stop for a minute? A woman in a denim jacket was packing up the leftovers. Most of it was stuff you'd expect at the tail end of a church sale. Chipped mugs, tangled cords, weird puzzles missing half the pieces. But one crate caught my eye. It was darker than the rest. The wood looked scorched almost, like it had soaked up every bad winter the mountains had thrown at it. There was a rusted iron latch on the front and a tag hanging from a piece of twine that said, "Free with purchase." I pointed at it and asked what it was. She barely looked up. Said it came from the Holloway place, she mumbled. Basement junk. I didn't open it. That name, Holloway, made my stomach turn a bit. No one in town really liked talking about that house. It sat out on Granger's Ridge, past a line of oaks that always looked like they were dying, even in summer. The last Holloway, Evelyn, died there on Halloween night back in the early 90s. Everyone had a version of the story. Some swore she poisoned her guests during a dinner party. Others claim she just disappeared, and the sheriff called it suicide to keep things quiet. Either way, no one had lived there since. I bought an old oil lantern for $2, just so I could justify taking the crate. It wasn't heavy, but it felt dense, like whatever was inside had presence. Back at my place, I set it on the kitchen table and unlatched it. The lid groaned when I opened it. Inside were a few dried flowers, a rusted brooch, some letters tied with twine, and something wrapped in this faded gray cloth. The letters were old but still readable, all written in the same kind of looping, elegant handwriting. Each one signed with E.H. They talked about the gathering and the chosen night, and every date hovered around the end of October. Some of them had these weird brownish stains on the edges, still sticky in places, even after who knows how many years. I unwrapped the cloth next. Inside was a porcelain mask. It was smooth and pale, with lips painted into this subtle, unnatural smile. The eyes were just empty holes. Behind it was a lock of hair, thick and dark, tied with red thread. It looked real, too real for a costume. I stared at it for a while, tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was some creepy Halloween prop. Maybe someone was pulling a weird prank. But the smell of it, old dust, dried flowers, and rust, it didn't feel like a joke. That night, I couldn't get Evelyn Holloway out of my head. She'd been this glamorous figure, young, wealthy, known for throwing these elaborate parties in that big house on the ridge. And then one day, the invitations stopped. A few months later, people said they heard screaming from the woods. When the sheriff finally showed up, she was dead. No sign of anyone else. The house was empty. No furniture, no bodies. Just wax melted into the floor and carvings dug into the dining table. That part's not just town gossip. I saw the photos once in the archives at the library. I don't know what made me do it, but the next morning I drove up the ridge. The road was mostly weeds and gravel now, trees leaning in from both sides. The house was still there, barely. The porch sagged, windows boarded up. Roof looked like it might cave in at any second. The front door was crooked on its hinges, but it opened when I pushed. I brought the mask with me. It just didn't feel right keeping it in the house. Inside, the air was thick and stale. The rooms were stripped bare except for this long table pushed up against the wall. Its surface was etched with circles and strange lines, worn down with age, but still visible. I set the mask in the center and stepped back. Everything was quiet. Then I saw it. Another mask, lying on the floor near the door. Same smile, same cracks along the edge, identical. There had only been one in the crate. I didn't wait around to see more. Ran to the car, slammed the door, reached for the keys, but they weren't in the ignition. They were sitting neatly on the passenger seat, right next to a folded piece of paper. The paper looked newer than the letters, but the handwriting was exactly the same. Elegant loops, black ink. It said, "For the next gathering." I didn't check the mirrors on the drive home. Told myself I'd toss the letters, burn the mask, be done with it. But when I got back, the crate was gone. The table where I'd left it was spotless, not just empty, dust-free, like nothing had ever sat there. I checked the locks. Door still dead-bolted, windows shut, but the smell, damp wood and wilted flowers, still hung in the air. That night, just after midnight, I heard 3 knocks on the front door. Even, slow, deliberate. I waited. When I opened it, there was no one there. Just the mask, hanging from the doorknob by the same red thread. I left it there until the sun came up. The next morning, I brought the mask and the letters to the sheriff's office. The deputy listened politely until I said the word Holloway. Then he leaned back in his chair and said that house had burned down in '92. Said nothing was left but the foundation. I told him I'd been there the day before, walked through the front door, saw the table, everything. He gave me this long look and said he'd drive up that afternoon just to clear things up. I followed him. He didn't ask me to, but I wasn't going to let him go alone. When we got to the ridge, the house was gone. All that remained was a patch of scorched earth, half covered in weeds. No porch, no walls, no table. The deputy looked at me like I'd lost it. Said, "Maybe you took a wrong turn." But I knew that road. There's only one way up and one way down. He left after that. Said he'd make a note in the report, for peace of mind. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every little creak felt like something moving closer. Then, around 3, I heard the back door creak open. Not a knock this time, just one long groan, then silence. I grabbed the flashlight and crept toward the kitchen. The door was shut, but hanging from the handle was another mask, smaller, child-sized, still looped with that same red thread. I locked every door, every window, and sat on the couch until morning. By the time the sun came up, the mask was gone. Just a faint ring on the paint where the thread had rubbed against the door frame. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Same handwriting again. It said, "You kept your promise. The seat is saved." Inside was a single dried flower, pressed flat. 2 months later, I packed up and left. Sold the house, didn't leave a forwarding address. But every October, the signs start showing up again. Little tags nailed to trees or fences. Same message. The Gathering. October 31st. Once, outside a gas station in Ash Hollow, I saw a pickup truck with its tailgate open. In the back was a single wooden crate. The tag said, "Free with purchase." This Halloween, I'm not waiting around. I'm leaving before the sun sets, and I'm not stopping until I hit real traffic. Because whatever's up on that ridge, it just waits for the next name to write down. My cousin Brennan had been helping run the haunted trail behind Good Shepherd Chapel for a couple of years, and that fall he asked if I wanted to pitch in. The trail was tucked behind the old Buckner Mill, just past the ridge that separated the chapel grounds from the deeper woods. It wasn't official church property, but they used it every October for this big haunted walk to raise money for youth retreats and overseas mission trips. It wasn't anything fancy, more of a homegrown thing. But people in town loved it. They came out in droves, year after year. It had a weird charm, like a small-town carnival thrown together by kids with zero budget and way too much time. The volunteer hours didn't hurt either. That's how they got us high schoolers to help, manual labor and jump scares in exchange for credit on our transcripts. So we got to work early in the month. We carved up jack-o'-lanterns with busted teeth and crooked eyes. Propped up scarecrows made from flannels and old jeans, stuffing them with straw from Brennan's stepdad's barn. We dragged out every busted-up Halloween decoration we could find in attic boxes. Doll heads, half-melted rubber spiders, baby monitors that still worked if you slapped them. Most of the trail was built around the natural layout of the ridge. There was a worn path already there from kids hiking and cutting through the woods to get to town. We just added to it. Threw in some caution tape, battery-powered lanterns, and about $6 worth of fake blood. The big feature was this old hollow log, maybe 20 feet long, that had split and fallen years ago. You had to crawl through it to stay on the path, unless you were willing to climb the steep, brushy slope around it. Everyone hated the log, which made it perfect. We planned our scares so you'd think you were done once you crawled out, but then someone would pop out screaming right after. Classic bait and switch. We had strobe lights in one section and a corn maze set up in the clearing near the chapel. Kids built a tunnel out of hay bales and old sheets, and someone even rigged up a speaker system that played pre-recorded screams and chainsaw sounds. It was all janky as hell, but people loved it. That year, Halloween landed on a Sunday, so we opened the trail the weekend before. Right away, something felt different. It wasn't anything obvious. More like a quiet weirdness under everything. Birds were just gone. That was the first thing I noticed. No crows, no chickadees, not even the little yellow ones that usually nest in the trees up there. And the squirrels, which were usually hopping around like caffeinated toddlers, had disappeared too. No rustling, no movement in the underbrush. Even the wind felt off. There's usually a dry hiss when it moves through the trees on the ridge, but this was more like pressure. Like you'd hear the leaves shift and then it would stop suddenly, like the woods were holding their breath. I chalked it up to nerves. Zadie didn't. She was Brennan's friend and the checkpoint lead that year. Smart girl sharp, always had some oddball story to tell. She said her grandpa warned her not to go near the ridge that October. Said it was a thin year. I asked what that meant. She just shrugged and said, "You know, when the in-between gets loose." Then she laughed, like it was a joke, but she kept glancing over her shoulder the whole time. Opening night, we had over 100 people come through. Families with kids holding flashlights too bright for their own good. Teenagers looking to make out or mess around. A few folks, clearly high, stumbling through the corn maze like it was a maze from The Shining. I got stationed at the section with the hollow log. It was just past the curve in the trail where the split rail fence ends and the trees start to crowd in. The log's dark even during the day, but at night it's basically pitch black, no floodlights. Just a single lantern about 15 feet down the trail that we used as a marker for the actor jump scare. I wore this heavy ghillie suit that made me look like a pile of moss with legs and crouched behind some brush. I waited for the screams to echo, which was usually my cue. About halfway through my shift that night, I saw her. A girl, standing alone just beyond the log. She wasn't walking, wasn't calling for help, just standing there, still as a statue. She was barefoot, wearing a pale blue dress that hid around her ankles, with tiny buttons running down the front, long sleeves. Her hair was down, messy, like she'd just gotten out of bed. I remember thinking she looked too clean. No mud on her hem, no scratches. Just standing there like someone had dropped her there like a misplaced toy. I figured she'd gotten separated from a group. Maybe her flashlight had died and she was waiting. I scanned the woods, expecting someone to yell her name or come running. No one did. I radioed Brennan, asked if we'd added a new actor. He said, "What are you talking about?" I described her. He went silent for a second, then said, "We don't have anyone like that on shift." I turned back to look at her. She was gone. No footsteps. No rustling, just gone. I checked behind the trees, even walked down to the next section. No sign of her. The next night, I came back early. Did a walkthrough of the log section myself. Didn't see anything out of place. By mid-shift, there she was again. Same spot. Same dress. Same blank face. Only this time, she didn't just stand there. She looked at me. Didn't blink. Didn't speak. Didn't speak. Didn't breathe. Just stared. I turned my head to call out, and when I looked back, she'd vanished again. No sound. Not a leaf moved. That night after cleanup, Zadie pulled me aside behind the hay bales. She asked if I'd seen anything weird. I didn't want to sound nuts, so I just said, "Maybe." That's when she told me about the girl she saw, near the tree line by the old fire ring. Said the girl was mouthing something, not speaking, just moving her lips. Said it didn't feel like a prank. Said it felt old. Then she told me something I hadn't heard before. Apparently, before the mill was built, there was a tiny schoolhouse up on the ridge. Just one room. It burned down sometime in the early 90s. No one knows why. Her uncle remembered hearing about a Halloween hayride where one of the wagons tipped trying to cross the creek. A little girl fell off and landed in the rocks. They didn't find her for 3 days. When they did, she was half submerged and wedged under a root, like she'd been trying to crawl out. Nobody remembered her name, just that she was around 9. And every once in a while on thin years, she'd come back. I still wanted to believe it was all just a story, until the props started misbehaving. Lanterns we set up would end up off the trail, turned upside down. Chainsaws that were checked and fueled would refuse to start. I was there the night someone knocked 3 times from underneath the footbridge. We all heard it. Brennan ran down there with a flashlight. No one was there. The scream box in the corn maze, that was the one that really got us. It played a new sound one night. None of us had added it. Just this soft, slow humming. Like a lullaby, but weirdly tuneless. A child's voice, quiet and clear. The preacher's son quit right after that. Said something, breathed on his neck in the tool shed. He'd been alone. Wouldn't come back. Zadie brought sage. Said we had to smudge the trail. Brennan didn't want her to. Said it felt like crossing a line with the church, but she did it anyway. 2 nights went by with nothing weird. Then Halloween came. I wasn't supposed to be there, but Brennan begged me to cover a shift. said he'd owe me dinner. I figured, what the hell? One more night. By 11, we were nearly done. Crowd had thinned out. We were packing up the fake blood and bundling up the extension cords when Brennan's voice came through the radio. "She's back," he said. I froze. He sounded off, like he couldn't quite breathe. "She walked the whole trail," he said. "Didn't scream. Didn't stop. Just walked." I asked if he was serious. He said she walked right through the tunnel, past the corn maze, and vanished behind the chapel wall. I told him, shut it down. And he did. That was the last night we ran the haunted trail. The next weekend, the preacher stood up and said they were done using the ridge. Said the fundraiser wasn't bearing the right kind of fruit, but the ones who worked it, we knew better. We didn't talk about it. Not even to each other. Until weeks later. Zadie and I went back up during the day. We hiked past the chapel, past the hay tunnel, into the deeper trees. That's where we found the headstone, tipped sideways under a curtain of vines. Weathered but still legible if you look close. Alma, born 1905, died October 31st, 1914. We stood there a long time. Zadie tied a yellow ribbon to the stone. I left a zinnia from my grandma's front yard. We didn't speak. We just stood, then walked away. I haven't been back since. Halloween never really meant much around here. We're tucked deep into eastern Kentucky, not far from the Virginia line, one of those places where everybody knows each other's grandparents, and nobody ever locks their doors unless it's Sunday. Growing up, Halloween was less about scares and more about plastic pumpkins and awkward hayrides at the church. Kids were out by 3 in the afternoon, church folks handed out cider and Bible tracts, and by the time the sun hit the horizon, it was like the whole town folded in on itself. Porch lights off, blinds drawn, streets dead quiet by 6. It was more habit than holiday. That year, though, October 31st, clear and cold. My buddy Owen had this plan to shake things up a bit. He was working at Hartsford Community College, mostly teaching intro classes to freshmen who hadn't quite figured out what they were doing there yet. He thought it'd be fun to lead a Halloween night hike, just something small for a few students, something spooky but safe. He figured we'd take one of the old service trails that used to run through Dunlow Ridge, where the coal lines once cut through the woods. He asked me to tag along since I knew the area better than he did, and I think he just wanted a familiar face to balance things out. I didn't have anything else planned, and honestly, the idea of doing something different, just once, sounded kind of nice. The trail he picked started about a mile past the last house on County Route 8. I remembered that house peeling red paint, one of those metal swings in the front yard that had rusted through at the chains. After that, the road turned to gravel, then dirt, and then nothing. Just forest. That whole stretch of woods had this forgotten feel to it. Not creepy, just used up. Like something had come through, taken what it needed, and left. We got there around 4 in the afternoon. Still light out, but the sun was already dropping low enough to stretch shadows long across the trail. I remember standing by the truck, just looking into the trees. It wasn't what I'd call quiet, not exactly. There were still birds, still the rustle of something small moving through leaves, but it all felt weirdly careful, like the woods were trying not to draw attention to themselves. Even the wind that usually came down from the ridge was missing. Owen laughed about it, said it was perfect Halloween weather, but I noticed he didn't look me in the eye when he said it. We parked off to the side and set up a few battery lanterns near the trailhead, just enough to mark the first 100 feet or so, in case someone strayed behind or lost their bearings. The students showed up a little after 6. There were 10 of them total, mostly first years. A couple in costume. One guy had on a half-ass vampire cape over his puffer jacket. Another girl wore cat ears and face paint. But most were dressed more for the cold than the theme. They piled out of 2 small cars, all of them loud, laughing, full of that weird mix of nervous energy and too much confidence. They had no idea what real dark felt like. Owen gave them the usual rundown: stay on the trail, keep your flashlight on, don't wander off to pee alone, that sort of thing. And then we were off, single file. The trail dipped right into the woods like a vein into skin. The first thing I noticed was how the light dropped. It wasn't even sunset yet, but under those trees everything felt darker. Flashlights came on fast beams, bobbing and swinging, catching bits of mist blinking off tree trunks. The trail itself was narrow and soft, layered in wet leaves that stuck to your boots. Every step made this muffled shuffling sound, like walking through an attic full of old papers. The trees were dense, tall, narrow, and packed tight. It felt like walking through a tunnel carved into the woods, and the further we went, the more the air started to close in. About 15, maybe 20 minutes in, the girl at the back, Becca, called out, said she saw something ahead. Just for a second, something fast. She thought it was a person at first, said it moved like it was sprinting across the trail, just beyond the reach of the flashlights. Owen tried to laugh it off, said it was probably a deer, but he sounded too casual. And Becca, she didn't look like someone who'd just spooked herself. She kept turning back, eyes scanning the trees. Said it didn't sound like a deer. Didn't make any noise at all. No rustling, no thump of hooves. Just movement. We pressed on, but slower now. The laughing had stopped. Flashlights moved slower, lower, focused more on what was up ahead. That's when we heard it. A sound I'll never forget. Thud. A pause. Then another thud. It wasn't sharp or high-pitched, like a crack or snap. It was low and solid, like something heavy dropping straight down into soft earth. Then another pause. Then again, thud. It had a rhythm to it. Everyone stopped. No one needed to say it out loud. Owen turned off his flashlight and motioned for everyone else to do the same. We stood in the dark. I could hear breathing, sharp, fast. The sound came again, closer, same pace. Thud. Pause. Pause. Thud. And then nothing. Like someone had pulled the air out of the woods, not even a breeze. It felt like pressure, like something holding everything still. One of the students whispered, "Is this part of it?" Nobody answered. I heard Owen quietly pop the safety on the bear spray. I'd seen him do it a dozen times during other hikes, usually when we saw signs of coyotes or a black bear nearby. This time, it felt different. We started moving again, faster. The trail widened just a bit ahead, an old clearing where the mining rails once looped before vanishing back into the forest. Owen swept his flashlight across it. That's when we saw it. Something moved. Quick, too quick. It crossed the entire clearing in a single smooth leap. It wasn't walking, wasn't running either. Its limbs bent wrong too long, elbows and knees pointing the wrong way, like a puppet without strings. The flashlight caught just enough of it. Gray skin, dull like old ash, with this awful wet sheen. And then it disappeared behind the tree line. No sound, no rustling, just gone. But deliberate. Like it wanted us to see it. Nobody moved. I could hear someone sobbing softly, not loud. Almost like they didn't want the sound to carry. Owen didn't say anything. He just stared at where it had gone. I remember thinking he was trying to come up with a lie he could believe. He muttered something about maybe it was an optical illusion, but his face said otherwise. We turned around. This time, I led. Owen took the rear. I kept my eyes on the trail, counting steps. The students were too quiet now. You could feel it, like the woods had swallowed up any sense of control. About 5 minutes into the walk back, I noticed the trail looked wrong. The trees felt closer. The slope of the ground was different. Then we passed a tree with a white tag nailed to it, a trail marker. Same one we'd seen going in. I recognized the knot in the trunk and the chunk missing from the side. We hadn't looped, there was no loop. But somehow, we were back at the same spot. Owen said we'd probably circled by mistake, but his voice had gone hoarse. He started calling out toward the trailhead, hoping someone might hear us. No response. Not even an echo, just trees. Then came the sound again, that same thudding rhythm. Off to our right now, just beyond the reach of the lights, moving with us. Not crashing through brush or tripping over roots. Just this fast, heavy, steady beat. Like it was gliding. Like it knew exactly where we were going. I yelled, told everyone to run, and we did. No formation, no order, just running. Flashlight swinging wild. I heard someone fall, heard the scrape of boots, a choked-out sob, but nobody stopped. We burst into the clearing where the truck should have been, and it was there. But the lanterns were off, all of them. Not broken, not knocked over, just off, like someone had carefully switched them all. Owen didn't hesitate. He got the truck started in seconds and hit the gas. No one said a word the whole way down the ridge. When we got back to town, Owen dropped them off one by one. Nobody asked what they'd seen. Nobody even looked at each other. When we were alone, Owen sat in the driver's seat for a minute before finally turning to me. He looked wrong, not scared exactly, just lost. Like he was trying to remember a dream someone else had. He didn't say anything, just nodded and drove off. The next morning, he called. Said he'd gone back up there, wanted to grab the lanterns and check the trail in daylight, but the trail wasn't there. No markers, no path, no sign of the clearing. Even the spot where we'd parked looked untouched, just solid woods, like no one had ever been there. I didn't say much. Didn't know what to say. That winter, folks started noticing things around Dunlow Ridge. Hunters said the ridge went quiet. No tracks, no movement, no birdsong. It stayed like that for months. And then one morning in early February, everything was normal again. Tracks in the snow, birds back in the trees. Like nothing ever happened. Owen quit his job that spring. Moved out west. Didn't leave a forwarding address. It was supposed to be just a quiet weekend in the hills near Coldwater Ridge, nothing special. I'd been to Brent's place before, but never alone. It's not the kind of house you forget. Built by our great-grandfather sometime in the 30s, the old farmhouse squats at the end of a winding gravel road, hidden between two steep hills thick with trees. It's beautiful during the day, green, peaceful, kind of still in a way that cities can't fake. But at night, it feels like the world just narrows. My cousin Brent had called a few days earlier asking if I could house sit while he took the kids to the Halloween parade down in Carver's Hollow. Just one night, no big deal. He promised there was plenty of food in the fridge. The satellite dish was half working, and if anything came up, I had full run of the place. He also casually mentioned, while handing me the keys, just don't leave the porch light on. It's kind of a thing out here. I asked what kind of thing. He smiled in that way he does when he's not sure if he's joking or not and said, "You'll sleep better not knowing." I thought he was being dramatic. I mean, I grew up in the suburbs. We don't really do superstitions. When I pulled up that Friday afternoon, the house looked exactly how I remembered it. Paint peeling in long curls, screen door hanging just a little crooked, wind chimes made from antique keys rattling gently under the gutter. The gravel popped under my tires like popcorn. Brent was still packing the car with costumes and snacks. His youngest, Tessa, waved at me with a juice box in one hand and a werewolf tail hanging from the other. Brent handed me a mug of coffee and the house rifle in the same motion, no explanation. Just, in case you hear anything, could be coyotes, could be raccoons. Don't go looking if you don't have to. He looked tired. Not just raising 3 kids, tired in the bones, in the shoulders, in the way his eyes flicked toward the tree line when he thought I wasn't looking. I told him I'd be fine. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just didn't want to make a big deal out of nothing. The sun dipped behind the ridge faster than I expected. It's strange up there. When the light goes, it goes. One minute you're sipping coffee on the porch, watching the trees sway. Next thing you know, it's pitch black, and you can't even see your own hand without a flashlight. I made dinner from a frozen pizza Brent left in the freezer and spent some time flipping through static on the radio. No real reception, just bits of music here and there, broken up by whispery voices that faded before I could catch more than a word or two. The wind outside got loud around 7. Not howling, more like pressing. You could feel it at the windows, like the whole house was being nudged. I figured it was just an old building creaking. I turned up the radio. That's when I heard it for the first time. A long, rough scrape like something heavy being dragged across the front porch. I muted the radio, sat still for a few seconds, thinking maybe it was a tree branch or a raccoon knocking something over. Then it came again. Same sound. Slower this time. Dragging claws, maybe. I grabbed the flashlight, peeked out the front window. Didn't see anything, but the rocking chair had shifted a bit, facing away from the door now. It was swaying like someone had just gotten up. I opened the door. The cold slapped me in the face. No animals in sight. No wind. I stepped outside and swept the flashlight across the porch boards. There were scratches. Faint, parallel. About the width of fingers. I swallowed hard and stepped back inside, locking the door behind me. Or trying to. The latch wouldn't catch. The whole assembly was bent slightly outward, like it had been forced from the outside. I pushed the door shut and dragged one of the dining chairs under the handle, wedging it tight. Then I went back to the kitchen and poured myself more coffee with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. I kept telling myself it was nothing. Old wood, raccoons, maybe a bear. Perfectly reasonable. I even started laughing at myself a little, right up until the footsteps started. Not creaking floorboards, not shifting house sounds. Actual footsteps, crunching through the dry leaves around the house. Slow, heavy, circling. I turned off every light. Not for any smart reason, just instinct. The sound always stayed a little ahead of me. If I went toward the back door, it drifted to the side of the house. If I paused in the hallway, it moved to the front steps, never rushing, just staying in motion, like it wanted me to know it was there. I didn't sleep. Around 10, the generator died with this low, dying groan like a throat clearing for the last time. Everything went silent. No fridge, no buzz, no buzz. Even the wind had stopped. I lit one of Brent's old candles and moved slowly through the kitchen, trying not to look out any windows. That's when I saw the smear. Dark and thick, like mud or something worse, smeared in uneven lines along the floor, starting at the back door, trailing all the way toward the stairs. My feet moved before my brain caught up. I followed it. Halfway up, the air felt wrong, too still. The candle shook in my hand, like it was breathing for me. And that's when I saw the mirror. Big, oval, with an ornate black frame and a crack running top to bottom. I don't know where Brent had stored it before, but it definitely wasn't there earlier. In the flickering candlelight, I saw myself, but only just, because behind me, there was something else. Tall, wrong, standing too close. I spun around. Nothing. I shut myself in the upstairs bedroom and shoved a dresser in front of the door. Sat on the floor with the rifle across my lap, staring at the window, and that's when I saw them. 3 figures standing just at the edge of the trees, each one holding a jack-o'-lantern. Flickering orange glows bobbing gently in their hands. They didn't move, didn't shift. They just stood there, staring, or at least facing the house. Too tall, too thin, arms hanging in ways they shouldn't. The pumpkins flickered, and then, after a long stretch of stillness, the middle one raised its hand, pointed directly at my window. The other 2 followed. I dropped the curtain and crawled backward. My throat was tight. Every part of me wanted to scream or run, but I just sat there. Then the scratching came back, inside this time, from under the floorboards, scraping from one end of the upstairs hallway to the other, like it was mapping the space, measuring. Then the humming. Soft, low, wavering, an old tune I hadn't heard since childhood. Something our grandmother used to hum when she folded laundry or lit candles on All Souls Day. She said it was for the spirits, so they'd know which way to go. The humming moved closer, one step at a time, floorboards creaking under something I couldn't see. Then 3 knocks at the door, soft, measured, like someone tapping a rhythm. I raised the rifle, arms shaking, whispered, "Go away." The knob turned once, then again, stopped. I waited. Minutes passed, then hours. The candle burned out. I just sat there in the dark, counting my breaths, watching the door. When the sun finally started to rise, I unlocked the door with fingers that barely worked. The hallway was empty, but at the top of the stairs sat a jack-o'-lantern. New, still warm. Candle burning inside. The grin was jagged, fresh, and smeared across the inside of the bedroom door. In something that smelled sharp and metallic were 5 words: You left the porch light on. I didn't pack, didn't grab my phone, didn't even shut the door. I ran, jumped in my car barefoot, and drove like something was chasing me, even though nothing showed in the rear view. Miles later, once the trees gave way to open fields, I called Brent, told him everything. The scratches, the mirror, the figures, the humming. He was silent for a long time. Then he said, calm and tired, "Devin, I told you not to leave the porch light on. It draws them in." And while he said it, I glanced into my side mirror, just for a second. And I swear to God, way back at the edge of the woods, I saw something orange flicker. Just once. Like a flame in the shape of a grin. I didn't slow down, didn't speak. Just stared straight ahead until I hit pavement and kept going. Our town sits tucked deep in the Blue Ridge part of Appalachia. Halloween's never really been a big thing here. Folks keep it simple. Pumpkins on porches, maybe a church trunk or treat for the kids. No haunted houses, no blood-splattered decorations, none of that. People around here say Halloween's just for city folks who don't know better. That year, though, the high school decided to host a haunted trail fundraiser. They used the woods behind the football field, near the old mining path. My younger sister, Ellie, was part of the crew. She and a few seniors spent a couple weeks building little scare spots out of tarp and scrap wood. She asked me to come by on opening night. Said it'd mean a lot if someone she knew showed up. So I went. By the time I pulled up, the sun was dropping behind the ridge. A few dozen cars lined the dirt shoulder. People had lawn chairs and thermoses, treating it like a fall festival. Kids ran around in chic costumes that made that crinkly sound when they moved. Someone had a small Bluetooth speaker by the ticket booth playing spooky noises, though it mostly just popped and fizzed. It all felt pretty harmless. I paid $2, got a wristband, and followed everyone toward the trailhead. Two students in black hoodies waved people through with plastic axes. They looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I nodded and walked in. The start of the trail was about what you'd expect. Plastic skeletons hanging from branches, a smoke machine puffing through a pallet tunnel, high schoolers in dollar store masks jumping out yelling boo, like they didn't even believe in their own scare. It was goofy, but fun. A few minutes in, the group ahead of me slowed down. Two girls started recording themselves on their phones. I didn't want to end up as background in someone's TikTok, so I slipped past them on the left, staying close to the rope line. That's when things started to feel off. The rope barrier thinned out. The jars lighting the path switched colors, from flickering candles to little battery lights. Blue, then green, then red. I figured it was just a change in theme, something the students planned to make things creepier. But when I looked back, the group was gone. Not behind me, not anywhere, just gone. I stopped. The path ahead narrowed, barely wide enough for one person. The lights stretched farther apart. I turned around, thinking maybe I'd taken a wrong turn. That's when I saw him. A man crouched beside a tree. No costume, no mask, no fake blood. Just this long gray coat that hung off him like it had been soaked and dried too many times. His arms dangled at his sides. He didn't move, didn't flinch when I saw him. He just watched me, head tilted slightly, like he was trying to figure out who I was. I stepped off the path and made a wide circle around him. When I glanced back, he was still crouched, still staring, same tilt of his head. No effort to scare me, just stillness. The kind that makes your stomach tighten before your brain even knows why. I picked up my pace. The trail dipped and curved left, deeper into the woods. I told myself this was still part of the haunted trail. Maybe a new section Ellie hadn't mentioned. But something felt wrong. The trees here were different, thicker, closer together. The dirt turned soft, then slick. There was this faint, sour smell. Not rot exactly, just old, like a damp basement that hadn't been opened in years. The lights flickered out one by one as I passed them. Behind me, a single crunch of leaves. Then silence. I kept walking. Another 20 feet and the trail split. One way led downhill toward an old wire fence. The other dipped into a shallow gully. No ropes, no lights, no signs. I froze. Even the usual night sounds were gone. Then I heard it again. That crunch. Slower this time, heavier. I turned. He was standing now, maybe 30 feet away. Arms hanging limp, head tilted so far it looked painful. He didn't blink, didn't speak, didn't move. I turned back and started walking fast. Not running yet, just fast enough to feel it in my chest. I reached for my phone, no signal, figures. I passed an old refrigerator half buried in vines, then a single child's sneaker, faded and curled. No props now, no decorations, just decay, then a voice. Not from behind me, from ahead, quiet, low, almost calm. Wrong way, it said. I froze. It wasn't loud, but it cut through everything. I looked up. There was another man, taller, thinner, wearing what looked like a burlap sack over his head. 2 small eye holes. He stood still between 2 trees. Didn't move, didn't speak again. I took a step back, then another. When I turned to run, the man in the coat was gone. No noise, no footsteps, just gone. I ran. Didn't care if I tripped or got lost. Just ran toward any light I could see. Eventually, the trees thinned and I spotted the yellow glow from the school's parking lot. Voices, car doors, normal life. I stumbled out of the woods, gasping, covered in sweat and dirt. People were still lining up for the trail. Kids laughing, music playing. No one even noticed I'd been gone for over an hour. I found Ellie near the concession stand. She frowned when she saw me. "You okay?" she asked. "You look like you saw a ghost." I told her what happened, just the basics. That I'd taken a wrong turn, that there was a man in a coat. Her face changed. Not scared exactly, just unsettled. She said, "There's no fork in the trail." I said, "I saw one." She shook her head. "There's only one path." We tied orange tape to every tree past the second station. I told her I didn't see any tape, that the jars changed colors, that someone spoke to me. She didn't say anything after that. I stayed near the crowd the rest of the night, just to hear laughter, music, real voices, anything normal. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't sleep the next either. The next afternoon, I went back. Ellie came with me. We walked the whole trail from start to finish. 15 minutes, tops. No forks, no colored jars, no fence, no gully, no clearing, nothing. She asked if I might have imagined it, got turned around. I told her no. I knew what I saw. I knew how far I ran. That night, I drove up the ridge where the signal's better. I searched the town's archive site, pulled up old land records. Turns out those woods used to belong to a man named Harold Murdoch. He died in 1978. He used to build scarecrows every Halloween, left them along the tree line. Kids said he'd talk to them with folded paper notes. They found his body near an old mine shaft, unmarked grave now. But I think I found where he used to walk, and I don't think that trail was part of the fundraiser. I think something old was waiting there. Something that still wears the shapes of people it used to know. I don't go near those woods anymore. Every Halloween, our little town of Maple Hollow in southern Appalachia turned into something out of an old storybook. It wasn't a fancy place, just a handful of stores, a gas station, a school gym that doubled as a community hall, and a white-painted church sitting at the edge of the valley. But on Halloween night, everything came alive. People who barely spoke all year came out to talk and laugh and buy slices of pie wrapped in foil. Bonfires burned in old steel barrels. The air always smelled like smoke, sugar, and fallen leaves. Kids ran around in their plastic masks and capes, waving glow sticks like fireflies. Someone always brought a big speaker that played scratchy old gospel songs mixed with country tunes. That year, I felt grown up enough to help out instead of just running around collecting candy. So I volunteered to stay after the festival and help clean up. It sounded easy enough: stack the folding chairs, sweep the floor, take down the streamers, maybe lock up when everyone left. Earl, the church's caretaker, was in charge. He'd worked there longer than I'd been alive. He was thin and wiry, his face carved with deep creases that made him look like he'd been born out of the mountains themselves. He didn't talk much, just nodded or muttered a few words when necessary. Everyone said Earl knew every inch of that land, every fence post, every gravestone, every strange little hollow between the trees. He could fix anything with wire and tape, and he walked those hills like someone who belonged to them. My cousin Ray and I were the only ones who stayed to help him that night. By the time the last kids left and the music stopped, most of the cars were gone. Only a few red taillights curved down the road, fading into the dark. The bonfire was still glowing in the pit, crackling softly. Paper cups and candy wrappers were scattered across the gravel. Pumpkin lanterns lined the path up to the church doors, their carved faces drooping as the candles burned low and melted the wax into messy puddles. Earl told us to stack the chairs inside the fellowship hall while he went to check the generator behind the building. The light above the door flickered once, like it was struggling to stay awake. Inside, the air was thick and still. It smelled faintly of burnt sugar from the bake sale and maybe a little like wet wood. Ray and I started stacking the metal chairs in neat rows. The legs clattered on the tile floor. We didn't talk much, just the occasional joke or grunt when one of us dropped a chair. At some point, I heard a faint scrape behind me. Not loud, just enough to make me pause. I turned, expecting to see Ray messing around, but he was all the way across the room, folding tablecloths. Then came the sound again. A dragging noise. Metal against tile. One of the chairs near the corner shifted an inch all by itself. I froze. Ray saw my face and laughed. He said, "Relax, man, the floor's uneven." But before I could answer, another chair tipped forward and fell flat. The sound echoed across the empty hall. Ray's smile faded. Then a third chair started to tremble, just slightly at first, like someone had brushed against it. Then harder. I reached out and grabbed it, trying to steady it, but it jerked right out of my hand and slammed backward. The noise made my ears ring. There was no wind, no open window, no reason for it. Ray's mouth opened like he wanted to say something, but before he could, the door creaked and Earl walked in. We both started talking at once, trying to explain. He frowned, not angry exactly, just tired. "Don't fool around in here," he said. "The church ain't a place for games." Then he turned and walked right back out. We watched him go, neither of us saying a word. After a minute, Ray laughed again, a nervous kind of laugh, and said he'd had enough for the night. He offered to drive me home before his girlfriend's curfew, but I told him I'd stay to help Earl finish. I didn't want to look scared. He shrugged, waved, and left. When his car's headlights disappeared down the road, the whole valley went dark again. The only sounds were the insects and the creek gurgling somewhere nearby. Earl's truck was still parked by the gate. The keys were dangling from the ignition, and the driver's door was half open. That felt strange. Earl wasn't the kind to leave something like that. I called his name once, then again louder. No answer. Then the motion light above the tool shed blinked on. I walked toward it. The gravel crunched under my shoes, each step loud in the quiet. The shed door stood open just a few inches. Inside, it was pitch black. I switched on my phone's flashlight, and the beam cut through the dark. Everything looked normal: shovels hanging from nails, a mower in the corner, gas cans lying neatly by the wall. But when I turned toward the door, I saw a handprint. Small, smudged into the wood with dirt. It looked fresh, like it had just been pressed there. Too small to be Earl's. I rubbed at it with my sleeve. The dirt smeared, but when I looked again, another faint handprint had appeared beside it, lighter, as if pressed from inside the door. That's when my throat went dry. I stepped back out of the shed, trying to laugh it off, telling myself it was just dirt patterns. But then I noticed something else. The line of pumpkin lanterns along the path began to flicker. One went out, then another, then another, then another. The flames dimmed one by one until the whole path was swallowed by darkness, leaving only the dull red glow from the dying bonfire. Even the insects seemed to quiet down. The only sound left was my own breathing. I turned toward the church. but the porch light was flickering too, on, off, faster and faster until it went dark completely. Something about that made my stomach twist. I could feel the cold air pressing in now, the kind that sinks into your skin. I went around back toward the cemetery. The ground rose gently there, covered in uneven grass and leaning gravestones. My flashlight beam danced over them, and that's when I saw it. Footprints in the mud. Bare feet. Small, sharp prints. The toes pressed cleanly into the soil. They weren't leading into the graveyard. They were coming out of it. I followed them before I even realized what I was doing. They wound between the graves, up to a small fenced-in plot surrounded by rusted iron bars. At the center lay a single gravestone, flat on its face. The ground beneath it looked disturbed, darker than the rest, as if it had been dug up and covered again. Then I heard breathing. Low, slow, right behind me. Not panic breathing, steady, like someone standing still. I turned, and there was Earl. He was only a few feet away. No flashlight, no tools, just standing there, eyes glinting faintly in the moonlight. "You shouldn't follow the prince," he said. His voice sounded normal, but thin, like he was speaking from a long way off. "They don't stop where you think they do." Then he walked past me, crouched beside the fallen gravestone, and pressed his hand flat against the dirt. The breathing stopped. The insects went silent again. I couldn't move. Earl told me to go back inside. Just that, nothing else. I did exactly what he said. When I looked back, he was still kneeling by the grave, motionless, one hand on the earth. His flashlight lay beside him, flickering weakly on the grass. I went inside the fellowship hall and locked the door. I sat in one of the stacked chairs and listened. At first there was nothing. Then I heard it, something shifting under the building. A long, slow creak. Then a scraping sound beneath the floorboards. Then silence again. I wanted to run, but his truck was blocking the gate, and I didn't want to walk home alone through the woods. So I stayed there until morning, staring at the door, waiting for daylight. When the sun finally came up, Earl's truck was still there. The sheriff showed up after someone noticed it and called it in. They found his keys, his flashlight, and a patch of soil near the graveyard fence that looked like it had been disturbed recently. No blood. No footprints. No sign of a struggle. They said maybe he'd wandered off into the woods, gotten lost, or fallen somewhere. But that didn't make sense. Earl knew those woods like his own skin. He'd never just wander. A few weeks later, the church reopened for Sunday service. Everything looked normal again. The chairs were stacked neatly. The lanterns were gone. A new caretaker was hired, a younger guy named Joe, who smiled too much and didn't like to be alone in the building after dark. Nobody mentioned Earl except in quiet whispers. Some said he'd finally lost his mind after too many years working that graveyard. Others said he'd found something he wasn't supposed to, something buried that should have stayed that way. I didn't want to believe any of it, but the next time I walked past the cemetery, I saw the prints again. Same size, same shape, faint, but still there, pressed into the mud as if they'd never dried. And when I leaned on the fence, the iron felt cold, colder than the air around it, almost like it was breathing. Every Halloween since, the church still holds its festival. People come and laugh and eat their pies just like before. But I stay home. My name's Kellen. Every Halloween out here in our part of the Appalachian Hills, the whole town just sort of flips itself inside out. They block off the main road, string paper bats across the power lines, and every porch gets a row of pumpkins glowing until morning. Folks call it the Harvest Watch. It's this old tradition that's supposed to keep the mountain spirits happy before winter hits. Honestly, I never cared much for it. But this one year, my cousin Mara asked if I'd help her run her cider booth down by the old courthouse lawn. She said the committee was short-staffed and I could use the cash. Hard to argue with that. The day was packed, loud music, grills smoking, kids darting between tables with caramel apples, and those cheap glow sticks that snap if you bend them too far. By the time the sun started dipping, the square looked like it was on fire from all the pumpkin light bouncing off the windows. I was still lugging boxes of pies out of Mara's truck when the church bell started ringing. 6 slow clangs that echoed through the hills. She looked over and said, "Go take a walk, Kel. You've been at it all day." So I did. Once you get past the edge of town, the pavement turns to dirt, and after that, it's just trees and fields. That's where I saw it, the old barn that's been slumping into the ground for as long as I can remember. Gray wood, half the roof caved in. My granddad once told me a preacher used to hold services in there way back when the mines were still running. Said the man went missing one winter during a storm and nobody ever found him. I hadn't thought about that story in years. Then I saw this faint orange glow sitting on the fence, and it all came rushing back. There was a pumpkin there, new, bright orange, carved clean with sharp little teeth and uneven eyes that gave it a crooked grin. It didn't fit. That whole field was just dead grass and rusted wire. No reason for someone to leave a decoration way out there. I figured some kid from the festival thought it'd be funny, so I decided to grab it before it got knocked over and set something on fire. I crossed the ditch, shoes sinking in the mud, and climbed the fence. Right as I landed, the pumpkin flickered once and the barn door creaked open. I stopped dead. No wind, no animals, nothing. But that door swung halfway open like it was waiting for me. I called out, "Hello?" Nothing, not even crickets. I walked closer, and the pumpkin's light dimmed to this faint glow. Then I realized there were more of them inside. Dozens, all carved differently. Some grinning, some screaming, every single one pointed toward the doorway. The air smelled like damp wood and old smoke, like the place hadn't been touched in years. I kept telling myself it was just a prank. Some kids probably hauled them out there to mess with people. I stepped inside to look. The floor sagged under my boots, soft with dust and rot. In the middle of the room sat a tall wooden chair. On it was one plain pumpkin, no face carved in at all. Right above it hung a rope, old and frayed, tied to a ceiling beam. That made my stomach twist. I turned to leave. Then I heard it. A dull thump under the floorboards, like someone knocking from below. Once, then again, then 3 slow knocks in a row. I crouched and pressed my hand to the wood. It vibrated under my palm like something was moving down there. 3 knocks, a pause, 3 more, each one heavier than the last. "Cut it out," I said, half hoping it really was some idiot hiding underneath. The knock stopped, dead quiet. Then the plain pumpkin on the chair started to tremble. Not roll, just shake like something was inside it trying to get out. The rope above it swayed, slow and deliberate, as if someone had brushed past. I started backing toward the door. When I reached for the frame, my hand hit solid boards. The doorway was sealed shut, no hinges, no handle, just rough planks where the open air should have been. I slammed my shoulder into it. Nothing. Behind me, the chair scraped across the floor. I turned, and it was inching toward me in these short jerks, the legs dragging through the dust. The pumpkin rolled off and hit the floor with a wet thud. It split open, not like a normal pumpkin cracking, but like something inside was pushing through. A thin black hand slid out long fingers, joints bent the wrong way. Then another. Both groped across the boards, leaving streaks that reeked like rot and wet soil. I didn't think. I just grabbed a broken plank from the floor and smashed it against the wall. Once, twice. The third hit broke through, and cold air hit me so hard it made my eyes water. I hauled myself out, cut my hand on a nail, and stumbled through the field until I hit the road. When I looked back, the barn was dark again. No pumpkins, no light, no sound. Just that empty shell against the trees. I ran all the way back to the square, covered in mud, heart hammering like I'd sprinted a mile. Mara saw me and asked what happened. I told her I slipped in the field. She gave me this look like she knew I was lying but didn't want to hear the truth. The band kept playing, and people danced around the bonfire like nothing was wrong. When I looked back toward the trees, I thought I saw that same orange glow, faint and flickering. I told myself it was just the festival lights. The next morning I drove out there again, just to prove it was all in my head. The barn was still there. Empty, silent, no pumpkins, no footprints, nothing. Only the chair was left, lying on its side near the doorway. I didn't go inside, but as I turned to leave, I saw something hanging on the fence, a little paper tag tied with twine. My name was written on it, neat, black ink. That night, I heard 3 knocks on my porch door. Slow, even. When I opened it, no one was there. Just a single pumpkin sitting on the steps, freshly carved, candle burning low. Its grin was the same uneven one I'd seen on the fence. I waited until midnight, then blew it out and set it by the road. By morning, it was gone. I haven't been back to the Harvest Watch since. On Halloween, our town put together this little festival at the old Briar Hollow School. The school had been shut down before my parents were even out of high school, but people still liked gathering there. It sat right in the center of the valley, where all the old families used to meet when there was still something worth meeting about. You could almost feel the memory of the place, like it was pretending to still be alive for one night every October. That year I was 19, and my cousin Leah somehow convinced me to help clean up after the event. She said it'd be quick: fold some tables, pick up trash, sweep the porch, maybe sneak a leftover caramel apple for the ride home. She had a way of making everything sound easier than it ever turned out to be. Most of the night we handed out cider to kids, and cheap plastic masks and flannel shirts meant to pass as scarecrow costumes. Someone had brought a speaker that played bluegrass mixed with static, and every few minutes it skipped like it was trying to die. The older folks gathered near the porch steps, swapping stories about who'd moved away and who hadn't made it to see another Halloween. It felt more like a reunion for ghosts than a festival for the living. By the time we started cleaning up, most of the lanterns were barely flickering. The last few families drifted off down the hill, their flashlight beams bobbing through the trees. Once they were gone, the quiet hit. The kind of quiet that feels heavy enough to notice. You could hear the wind sliding through the hollow, brushing against the tall grass around the schoolyard. The air smelled faintly like wood smoke and cider that had gone too warm. Leah's pickup sat at the edge of the field, headlights cutting a pale strip through the fog that was starting to roll in. We loaded the leftover crates of apples, the trash bags, and the rickety folding tables into the back. Leah joked that the festival felt smaller every year, like the valley was slowly giving up on itself. She wasn't wrong. Most of the younger people had left for college or better jobs, and the ones who stayed mostly talked about leaving. It was close to midnight when we finally started down the road. The path wound between black trees that bent toward the truck like they were trying to listen. The creek beside the road made that low rushing sound it always did, and fog hung low, thick enough that the headlights just disappeared into it. The tires crunched the gravel, echoing in that empty, hollow way sound does when you're too far from town. Neither of us talked for a while, just that kind of tired silence that settles in after a long day. I remember leaning my head against the window, feeling it vibrate with the hum of the engine. The first landmark we passed was the Pine View Church, the one with the white paint that always peeled no matter how many times they redid it. They still used it for potlucks and funerals and whatever counted as community anymore. The building leaned a little, but nobody ever said anything about fixing it. After that came the Harlan property. Everyone in town knew that house. It sat back from the road, behind a gate that had been missing a hinge since forever. The Harlans had been gone since before I was born. People said the youngest boy ran off to Indiana, and the rest either passed or drifted away after the mine shut down. The house itself was 2 stories, faded red siding, the porch sinking into the dirt. It looked tired, like it had been exhaling for years and just hadn't stopped yet. No one had seen lights in it since maybe the 70s. But as we came around the bend that night, Leah slowed down and squinted ahead. "Someone's up there," she said. At first, I thought she meant a raccoon or a trespasser. Then I leaned forward and saw it too. In the second-story window behind a warped pane of glass, something stood. It was tall, still, facing the road. The head caught the light from the truck. It was pale, so pale it almost glowed, and the longer I stared, the more wrong it looked. Not quite a mask, not quite skin. The face seemed too long, too narrow. The shape of a snout maybe, stretched and smooth like someone had pulled it too far. It didn't move. Not once. Even when Leah stopped the truck completely. We sat there, the engine idling soft, both of us staring at that window. The figure didn't shift or turn or flicker in the glass. It was just there, solid and impossible. The air felt weirdly still, like everything around us had stopped to wait. Leah whispered, "What is that?" Her voice barely came out. I didn't answer. My throat felt dry, and my heartbeat had gone sharp and heavy. I just watched, waiting for it to blink or fade or reveal itself as something explainable. But it didn't. The more I looked, the stranger it seemed. Like its outline didn't quite match the house behind it. The shape had weight, but it didn't fit the space it was in. Almost like looking through fog that had decided to hold its breath and stay solid. Then Leah did something that made my stomach drop. She flicked off the headlights. The road went black. It was only a second, but in that second, the dark felt alive. When she turned the lights back on, the window was empty. No shape, no face. Just the warped glass and the faint flutter of a curtain moving. Leah swore under her breath and slammed her foot on the gas. The truck jolted forward. Neither of us said another word until she pulled into my aunt's driveway. Right before I got out, she said quietly, "You saw it too, didn't you?" I told her, "Yeah." There was no point pretending otherwise. She told me not to mention it to her mom, that we'd just sound crazy. I didn't argue. The next morning, over breakfast, my aunt casually mentioned that the Harlan house had been torn down the previous winter. Said the roof collapsed after a storm, and the county hauled everything away, even fenced the lot. Leah and I just looked at each other across the table. I laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that makes anything better. It came out flat, nervous. That afternoon, we drove back out there. The old gate was gone, replaced by a loose chain and a weathered "no trespassing" sign. We climbed over anyway. The field was overgrown, weeds up to our knees, thick enough to hide the path. And where the house had stood, there was nothing. Just the stone foundation and a few blackened boards scattered around like the bones of something old and half forgotten. No porch, no roof, no windows. It looked like it hadn't been a house in a very long time. Leah kicked at the dirt near where the steps used to be. She said softly. We both saw it. I didn't answer. I just kept looking. And that's when I saw it, half buried in the soil near the foundation. A shard of glass, cracked right down the middle, the edges dark like they'd been burned. I crouched down to pick it up, but as soon as my hand got close, something in me pulled back. The air felt strange, thick. Like everything around that piece of glass was just slightly off, vibrating wrong. Leah asked if I wanted to keep it, for proof. I told her no. Instead, I pushed it deeper into the dirt with the heel of my boot until it disappeared under the weeds. And then I just turned back toward the truck. We didn't say a word the whole ride home. After that, Leah stopped going to the Halloween festival. So did I. Neither of us even talked about it again. It just became one of those silent things between us. A few months later, when winter hit and the snow covered the valley, I drove past that place again. No sign of a house, no fence, not even the post where the mailbox used to stand. It was like the land had swallowed it all whole and smoothed over the surface to hide the evidence. That was 3 years ago. Now, every Halloween, I stay home. I keep the porch light off, pretend not to hear the few kids who still come around. I tell myself I'm just tired of it all. The decorations, the noise, the pretending,